He's muted himself. Oh,
Okay,
he's
I
back.
am unmuted now. Good. So, welcome everyone, guys. I welcome you all on behalf of Flying Stories. Our goal with Flying Stories is to introduce pilots and their ideas to help you execute your flying dreams. Our today's guest is a ridiculously successful pilot from Manali. At age 14, he first picked up his glider and has been romancing in the skies for past 26 years. While there was absolutely no one in the country at that moment to give a structured training, he went through the progressions of learning paragliding through magazines, paragliding videos, and talking to other pilots. He is the first Indian pilot to fly acro competitions in India, and till date, the only pilot to have represented India in the FAI World Aerobatics. He has been most successful cross-country competition pilot in the country and the only pilot to have reached FAI ranking of top 50 in the world. He was the first pilot, along with Andy, to fly from Billing to Manali, which was considered impossible once upon a time. He is the one who actually gifted flying in Beer Back Mountains to the world. And in a way, every other pilot coming to Beer is able to fulfill their dreams of flying the back mountains because he was the one who took the first step to show that it is possible. Being a true adventurer and a competitor that he is, in the most simplest form of free flying, he started showing his class by chasing distance records in the country. He is the first one to fly 200 kilometers out and return flight from Billing, and thereby introducing again to the world that Bir Billing is a place to visit for all who dream exceeds. Pilots from around the world chase his distance record, his flying lines every year, only to get disheartened by new distance record and new lines he creates whenever he arrives next. Needless to say, his track logs are most analyzed by XC pilots coming to fly in the B. In my pursuit to understand and learn the greatest paragliding pilots in the country, he is the one that sets the standard. So help me in welcoming the man who currently holds the record of flying the longest XC flight in the Himalayas and the only Indian to have flown a 300 kilometers plus flight. An acro pilot, a world-class XC pilot, a world-class competition pilot, a professional tandem pilot, an XC guiding instructor, SIV instructor, and in my eyes, one of the most complete pilots of our generation, the Sarvagun Sampan, Debu Choudhry. Debu,
Thanks.
let me also introduce which what would be your topic for today. We are now going ahead with the topic of basics of all beef. I think there is none other than Debu in the country right now who can really take us through the journey, the way he has gone through it, and through his guiding career, the the basic aspects to keep in mind all the time. Debu, I hand it over to you.
Thanks again, Alok, for your amazing intro. You're making me blush again. And hi everyone, and again, thanks Flying Stories for hosting this great show again. And yeah, I've been attending the sessions the last few days, and it's really great, especially in these strange times that we can all get to share some knowledge and see each other and have a laugh and enjoy all of these talks. Um, so today's topic, the basics of Volbiv. We discussed what topics would be interesting, and we came up with this topic. We thought a lot of people are interested by this topic. And let me just start by just saying a little bit about why I love going Volbiv, and a little bit about what I've done with the Volbiv. I mean, it didn't initially appeal to me so much in the earlier years. It's only been about 10 years that the appeal came to me. In like 10, 12 years ago, I was more into doing competitions and doing acro, and I was like, yeah, Volbiv is cool, but I'm not really into it now. But I think for anyone who is a mountain lover and likes paragliding, it's kind of the ultimate adventure. And I mean, me personally, I haven't, I'm not a big Volbiv expert. I've done some for fun, and I've guided a few trips. And I haven't done any amazing expeditions like friends, like Antoine and Mike and all. They did the huge Himalayan Odyssey, and other friends have done, extreme wall beeves and big distances. I've only done small wall beeves, and mainly with friends, and mainly just for fun. And I think, for me anyway, the beauty of Volbiv, it's not so much chasing numbers or having huge flights. It's more the experience and the beauty of being in the mountains. And also for me, the very important thing is doing it with friends. I mean, I've only, I think, done one night out alone, maybe at one point. And I think just the beauty of doing it with friends and experiencing the mountains and the beauty of being able to fly to somewhere beautiful and beautiful place. It says my. Can you hear me fine, Alok? It says my connection is no good, but seems to be working. Okay.
It's fine. It's fine.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. For me, that's just a really special feeling to be able and have the privilege as a paragliding pilot to do that. I mean, I did many years of trekking in Himachal and all around in Nepal as well. And yeah, Volbiv has a similar kind of appeal to it, where you get to go to beautiful places. It's a little bit even like cheating. It's like, easy trekking for someone lazy. But yeah, for me, that's the beauty of it is being able to get to these amazing places and have the privilege of sharing that with friends. Um, and in today's talk, basically, I'm more, I was thinking more about answering people's questions, and we're talking about the equipment and the stuff. Before we start with all of that, I'd just like to say the importance. I mean, Volbiv is very appealing, and I'm sure everyone would love to go and do it. But obviously, there is quite a big element of danger in it. You are flying to unknown places, and you are landing somewhere you haven't landed before, and you are going to take off somewhere you haven't had before. So you're obviously, there is quite a big risk factor to it, where stuff could go wrong. If, say, you're landing in a remote place and you crash on the landing, the consequences could be serious. So I think before anybody actually even thinks about going for Volbiv, your skills should really be, you should really be on it with your takeoff and landing skills. And I think until you have those skills really dialed down, and you are confident landing out somewhere and taking off again, and not just landing, but looking at a place, say you're flying and saying, okay, I'm going to land there, and analyzing the conditions, the wind, and all the factors, and weighing up the risk versus the reward before you make that decision, and being able to pull off a safe landing in a remote, maybe slightly dangerous place, and then being confident that you can take off there again. And if you cannot take off there again, then making the decision that, okay, I can walk out of there. So, with Volbiv, there is a huge part of it that's assessing the dangers, and that. So I think it's obviously, it's not for everyone. You need a certain level of flying skill, and I think till you have that, it's maybe not worth the risk. I mean, we're lucky in beer. We have some easy places that you can actually start, like, just even 360 is. But even there, the landing can be a little bit technical if you're not up to it. And we have some other places along the ridge which are fairly easy to land to start doing Volbivs. But obviously, it's great that if everyone can go Volbiv, but please be aware that it is a slightly risky business before you actually think about doing it and doing it safely. Another thing is, obviously, like I said before, if you are, if you do feel you're ready, okay, I can start to go for a Volbiv. I think it's very important to be at least two or three people to help each other out. I think, if you are going to go off alone, then you really need to be a very good pilot, and be capable of surviving in the mountains and knowing what to do if you decide to do this alone. Um, Another thing about Volviv as well, especially it's usually done in the mountains, you need to have some sort of knowledge of the mountains and how to survive and how if things go wrong or whatever. Obviously, you want to let others know that you're going to go and do something like this. If something goes wrong, you need to have some kind of backup. So yeah, the idea of Volbiv is very romantic and very nice, but the reality, yeah, you have to look at the reality and weigh up the risk versus the reward to make sure that it's actually going to be safe for you to do this.
So, Debu, let's go in the direction of how do people start? What aspects should a person consider now if I were to start? How do I go about it then?
Uh, okay, so like the first thing I said already, your takeoff and landing skills need really to be on it. Yeah. So I mean, like I've run a couple of Volbiv courses over the last couple of years in beer, which is something new. And I've actually guided for a long time with Himalayan sky safaris with John and Eddie. And the trip is not all about Volbiv, but we do include 1 or 2 nights of Volbiv on the trip. So like I said, your takeoff and landing skills are very important. So when I run a trip where I take people Volbiv, uh, I want to check out their takeoff and landing skills first. So usually we spend the day doing various top landings. Maybe usually I start with just having people top land back at launch a few times just to see their actual skills and if I feel people are up to it. And
And
then I will maybe, yeah, carry on.
yeah, and is it important to have a top landing skill? Can people not land at the bottom of the valley, then hike up, and then do this exercise if possible?
That's absolutely possible. You can do that. Me personally, I'm much too lazy to do that. But you could land somewhere lower down safely and even camp there and walk up the next morning if you're keen. But most paraglider pilots I know are pretty lazy. And okay, there is a whole new generation of hike and fly pilots who are more fit and into that. But most Volbiv pilots would like to land, camp, have a good time, and take off again from there rather than long walks. I mean, obviously, if it's a little walk to a place which is going to be much safer to launch than where you've landed, that's normal as well. But yeah, so I would say takeoff and landing skills is important. That's the first. That's the base. Yeah. And then obviously there's the whole equipment side of the story, which I'm sure we'll get some questions and we'll get into when it comes to Volbiv. Obviously, if you're going to camp out for a night, you're going to need stuff like sleeping stuff, food, water, and all of this stuff. So you're going to have to carry all of that stuff. uh, so there's a whole subject on how are you going to carry it, where is it going to fit, is and how much do you need, what do you need, etc., etc., etc. So I think for the beginning, like if you want to get into Volbiv, usually, I mean, what we always did was usually just do one night out. So obviously you don't need huge amounts of equipment, but still you need to fit a sleeping bag, a mat, maybe a tent, a pot, this, that, etc., into your harness. So you need to work all of that out. And if you get into it seriously, then obviously you need dedicated equipment, the lighter the equipment. If you do have to walk out or do any kind of walking, you obviously you don't want to have your whole equipment weighing 30 kgs. Ideally you want it to be 20 max, and under that. Does that kind of make sense, Alok, to what you were asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
And from
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, from the safety aspect, how should people already start preparing in that direction? What should they have in their as part of the first aid kit or the survival skills that you talked about?
So yeah, I mean, uh, uh, obviously you have a first aid kit. I think Nakul talked a lot about that yesterday, so I'm not going to go into what's in the first aid kit, but basic, a basic first aid kit. And obviously, like in Nakul's talk, I didn't manage to do the whole thing yesterday because I had some stuff to do. But yeah, having some basic first aid and wilderness first aid knowledge is obviously going to help if if you're thinking to go out and spend time in the mountains. I usually, when I'm flying Volbiv, especially when I'm guiding, I usually have a rope and some tree rescue kit. Yeah. And another important thing is obviously water. I always try and carry 2 or 3 liters, ideally, of water, which which can get you through one night and part of a day. So having the basic stuff to survive in the mountains is kind of important. Obviously having a knife, stuff to make a fire, and all of these things. Like you can just imagine it as if you're going for a camping trip or you're going for a trek. You're going to need the whole all of the same stuff with you, but obviously you're going to have to compromise on stuff with the weight, and compromise on the weight so that you can actually get everything to fit in your harness and carry everything. Now the whole thing goes as well. If you have extra weight, you have your normal glider and your normal harness. And if you're in the weight range in normal flying, you have to realize that obviously if you're carrying all this extra stuff, you're going to be heavier on your glider. Are you going to be too heavy on your glider? Are you going to go above the weight range? If you go over the top of the weight range, landing and taking off is going to be even harder than it would be normally. So there's a lot of things to consider before you actually go on a Volbiv. So yeah, all of these things need to be considered and worked out.
Uh,
So obviously, yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So one quick question that came out of your weight range thing. How much off do you go above the weight range? Uh, in general, what would you say? I mean, of course, if you go to the manufacturer, they would say you have to be within the weight range. But practically, we all do some different things. We,
Yeah. Um, Basically, for me, over the last, let's say, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've gotten more and more into Volbiv, and it appeals to me more and more, and I really enjoy it. It's something that excites me, and with my flying, I need to find new things that keeps me excited and motivated. Since I've been doing it for so long, just to go just for a fly around doesn't really motivate me. I'd rather go fishing or something. So I need to find new things, and Volbeef really excites me. So I've been getting more. Each year I try and add to my gear. So I've actually got a whole kit now that's dedicated to Volbeef, which is obviously I've got a super light harness and lighter and lighter stuff, so that when I'm actually fully charged for Volbeef, I'm not too far off the top of the weight range. The glider I fly at the moment is 95 max, and I think last year when we went for a few days Volbiv in beer with friends, and I actually had food and stuff for 5 or 6 days, and obviously carrying 2 or 3 liters of water. I was coming up to about 98, 99 kilos. So 4 or 5, I would say, not more than 5 kgs over the max of your glider. And then again, depending on your skill as a pilot, if obviously flying your glider 5 kg over the top of the weight range is going to make it much more dynamic. Landings are going to be faster. Taking off is going to be harder because you've got a lot of weight on you. And if you do have a collapse or an incident, you need to be aware that everything is going to go much faster, because the glider is loaded right to the top or even over the top. So you need to be aware of that. Yeah.
so if you're flying higher ranges, you have to be really good with your glider control skills as well. I mean, better
Yeah,
than
I
you.
mean, your glider is going to be more solid. Your glider is going to feel more solid, and it's going to cut through turbulence, and it's going to be more collapse resistant. But when it does collapse or stuff does go wrong, it's obviously going to happen faster, because you're loaded. That's kind of basic knowledge. The heavier you are, the more loaded, the more quick the reactions and stuff are going to be. But the more solid the glider is going to be. The more underloaded you are, the less solid the glider is going to feel. It might collapse easier, but all the reactions are going to be slightly slower if you're very light on a glider. Whereas on the opposite, if you're very heavy on a glider, everything is going to happen a little bit quicker. So you need to be aware of that when you go flying Vivi, because not everyone has two kits or
Yeah.
three kits, or a special Vivi kit. People who are just are going to be using their regular kit. So you need to make some compromises on the weight and stuff, and be aware of not going too much over the weight range, because that's going to change the behavior of your glider.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah. So moving on, in the safety aspect, would you also recommend to have a spot or an in-reach? In-reach makes more sense in general, but
Uh,
uh, how do we go about it? It being illegal in India, then how do we still go about it? Yeah.
Absolutely, I knew this was going to come up. And I was just going to say no comment, but we need to talk about it a little bit. I think it's if you're going Volbiv, especially for a few days, it's absolutely essential piece of kit. And I know it's illegal in India, so I'm not going to go into detail in it. But I would recommend having some kind of tracker like that, which if you get into trouble, could save your life. And as we've seen, in the past, it has saved lives, the spot and the inReach. I would say it's an essential piece of kit. But like I said, I'm not going to go into detail because we all know what the story with it is in India. But a lot of us have one as well. So yeah. So should we leave it at that?
Yeah. Okay. I think with this, we've covered the basics of how to start, about safety aspect as well and kit aspect as well. Is it okay with you? We open it for questions to everyone.
Yeah.
Do you want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
cover
Sure.
something? Yeah.
Let's go. No, that's kind of it. I mean, I think it'll get more interesting with questions. I mean, I can go through a kit list of what I take, but I think a lot of that will come up.
Yeah.
Will come up with the questions as well. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go ahead then. Um, Guys, I think we can now go for the question. You may raise your hand at first, and then we can unmute one by one. Okay, we have a question by Lister. Let me unmute him first, and I'll let him ask the question. Go ahead, Lister. Yeah.
Hi, Debu. It's Warwick here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Warwick. How are you?
Very, yeah,
Yeah,
very
I
well,
can
mate.
hear you.
Good. Question. Can you go into a little bit more detail of what are the risks inherent in going over the back in billing, which you might not encounter on the front ridge? Other than, I mean, you've already talked. You've already talked about the risk of landing and taking off at altitude. But what are the other risks? I mean, weather systems, etc.
Okay. So if you want me to compare the risks to the back compared to the front ridge in beer, yeah, mainly. Want me to stick to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you know, I've flown along the front a bit, and I think for a pilot, like an intermediate pilot like me, you look over the back, and it's almost like Mordor. It's like this, psychologically terrifying place to consider flying into, and I just wonder whether the fear that we have of it is actually justified, or actually is it not as bad to fly over the back there as we maybe think it is in our minds?
Um, I think well, if you look at the back range and the front range in beer, it's kind of a different different terrain. First of all, once you jump over the back, you get into more valley and valley wind systems, which we don't have so much in the front. We have the flats in front. We have all the spurs create their own little valley in beer. So if you get down low in the spur, you will have back. It's the valley wind that changes everything. So basically, you don't want to get low down in those valleys because if it is a strong day, you're going to encounter a strong valley wind, and that is not much fun when you're in a tight valley and you have strong valley winds. Now again, the risk on the front ridge, if it starts getting hairy or it starts getting nasty, you can always head southwest and run away to the flats, and land somewhere out there, and it's usually fine, especially if it storms and stuff. Whereas if you're in the valley systems in the back and stuff starts to go wrong, then you haven't got that nice escape route. So yes, it is much more uh, it is more dangerous, definitely, flying in the back. Um, and regarding to Vol Biv, in the back, obviously, if stuff goes wrong on the back ridge or in one of the valleys, in the back, rescue is going to be much harder and longer. On the front ridge, some of the places, even people have crashed on the front ridge, and it might seem a long way and stuff, but in Beer, it's easier to get a helicopter there. And even if the helicopter doesn't get there, the rescue team in Beer, which they're amazing, these guys, they walk for hours, and they've done some amazing rescues on the front ridge, which you would have thought impossible, but they get there and they have saved people's lives. Whereas if you are in the valley at the back, it's already going to take them much, much longer to get there. And obviously, the risk of and you have to walk out of there. It can be more dangerous. On the front ridge, there's often shepherds and lots of shepherds paths, whereas the back range is just much, much more wild. um, yeah, does that kind of answer some of your questions, Warwick?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Cool. Also, there's bears in the back range. Which is not so much on the front.
Okay, next question is from KK. KK, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, hi Debu, how are you?
Hi, KK, I'm good.
Okay, Devu, so I've been doing cross-country flying, but always dreaming of Volbev. So when we take up a
Yeah.
cross-country flying, at least I'll talk about myself, there is always a mental preparation, I mean, before I come for a trip, and even, the day I'm heading on
Yeah.
a big taxi, there's always a mental preparation and a mental note that I have for myself. So what is that mental preparation that you need for a Volbev flying? How do you have to be mentally prepared for it? What aspects go into it?
Uh, kind of, I don't know, kind of similar to going for a cross-country flight. You have your plan, okay, obviously, depends if you're doing 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights out, whatever.
Okay.
And basically, if you have it well planned, and obviously, if you're going for a Volbiv rather than just a normal XC flight, the planning of your equipment is going to be much more important. You're going to need more equipment. You're going to need food. So working all of that out and having all the right stuff that you need is going to be important. Um, and mentally as well, mentally, I mean, there's, yeah, preparing to obviously spend time out in the mountain, and mentally also preparing yourself to say that, well, this is what I would like to do, this is the ideal situation, but it might not happen, the weather might not be good, so mentally preparing yourself for disappointment, whereas you might take off with 3 days worth of food and this and that, and an hour later you might find yourself at the landing field or down. So to be ready on the Volbiv, the expectations might be more than just a cross-country flight where there is a chance where it might not work, but a Volbiv might have got a lot more preparation into it, and maybe the weather is not ideal or what. So as well, having mentally preparing yourself to say, okay, no, this doesn't feel right, or this is too risky, or the weather is not good, so we're going to call this off. Maybe I try again the next day or next time. So I would say, yeah, with Volbiv, for me, the main mental thing is maybe just to prepare a bit more for the disappointment if it doesn't happen. Otherwise, it's, yeah, similar like going on a trek, you know, like a small trek or whatever. A similar kind of preparation.
Okay.
That makes
Thank you.
sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Renul. To every participant who is raising a question, please switch on your video as well.
Hi, Debu. So
Hi, Renal.
I'm very excited and I'm hoping to go ahead with some Volvives this year whenever I get the chance to. So what would you say could be a step-by-step plan, or what do I get ready with in terms of my kit? A basic route map, you could say, because I have some great friends who are into some amazing flying. But yeah, how do I approach it? And yeah, guys, I'm going to put my video off. I don't have good bandwidth. Okay, I'm really sorry. I'm putting my video off. Yeah.
Yeah, Renul. So I think obviously you're planning to do this in beer, I guess.
Assuming yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming you want to do this in beer. I mean, yeah, most important thing, Renul, I would say is obviously to go with friends who have maybe done it before or who know the place, which I don't think you have a shortage of. Uh, and regarding the equipment you need, if you want, drop me a message and I'll send you my kit list. It'd be easier than actually going into it point by point. And I'll send you the kit list with that. And obviously, looking at the weather and doing it with good friends. And if you're going to do it in beer,
Mm-hmm.
you can start with there's Hobbiton, there's the golf course,
Yeah.
360. There's places that are fairly easy and one beer. There's plenty of people who can give you the right advice and plenty of friends for you to go
Mm-hmm.
with. So I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be an issue, no?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll
Yeah.
message you all if you could share the, like, what all preparations we need to do in terms of the kit would be great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll send you a kit, and then it's easier. Then you'll have a list with all the stuff
Yeah.
that I use. Obviously, that's my list. Maybe other
Yeah.
people have other stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
no worries.
Works. Thank you.
Great, cool.
Okay. Next question is from Bhushan. Bhushan, you may switch on your video as well.
Hello, Debu.
Hi, Bhushan.
So my question is, I understand and I appreciate, the preparation that has to go into Volbiv. So this is not really for immediate use that I can put into, but just developing an approach towards, Volbiv as a target. So I was thinking on the lines of having a pre-decided the landing spots along the Volbiv route versus evaluating them while flying. Now, with this, the thing that I want you to talk about is more about weather that we encounter that day while flying versus what is known to pilots like you. Like, for example, I go in Beer and I plan a small route of maybe 3 days of Volbiv. Would you think it's a good approach to consult pilots and fix on spots that I should land at, or it should always depend on the safest spot that I feel that I can land at on first few Volbivs that I take? So a little bit on that approach and how to develop it would be great. Thanks.
Okay, good. Nice question, Bhushan. I think if you're getting into Volbiv and it's your first few Volbivs, I mean, over the last 10, 15 years, beer and the whole area around has become quite a mecca for Volbiv in the whole world. I mean, each year we have in October more and more people coming for Volbiv. So I think a lot of the good spots around the beer area have been sort of marked, and we know that that's a good spot to take off and that's a good spot to land, and if it goes wrong you can actually walk out of there. So I would say if you're starting to your first few bivouacs, it would be nice, it would be good to have a predetermined plan with spots, and obviously, and that landable, relatively safely landable. I think I would stick to that. Then again, with the weather aspect, obviously, if you're on a Volbiv mission and the weather is not ideal, or it looks like landing there might be too risky, you need to make that call. And obviously, like I said with KK's question, you need to be ready to abort your mission and say, well, today it's not safe here. um, I think in the beginning, it's probably better to do that in places that have been tried and tested, rather than if unless you're a really good pilot and really confident to look at a new place and assess it from the air and say, okay, I think that's fine to land there and that's going to be takeoffable. In the beginning, I would stick to known spots, especially since we have all these known spots that we know are good. Um, Now, continuing on your question, if you're coming up to a new spot and having to evaluate if I can land and take off there again, obviously you're going to be looking at how the wind is coming up to that place, where the wind is channeling from, which direction should I be landing it, and obviously is there going to be somewhere to take off again. I mean, for one thing I keep in mind if I'm landing in a new place for a biv, is obviously I need somewhere to take off again the next day. That's not going to be too far away to walk, half an hour, 1 hour walk max, especially if you have a lot of gear. So you're looking at places that are maybe more east, southeast facing, so you can take off early in the morning and make the most of the day. So there's all those aspects of things to look into. And obviously, if it's a new place, you want to make sure that you can land safely. So, rather than just going straight in and trying it, I will make a few passes, fly around, the area has lifts, fly around, really check it out. If I'm landing in a new place to spend the night, is from the air you have a great view to see if there is actually a water source or a stream or water nearby that's accessible, which makes camping much more comfortable if you have a unlimited supply of water rather than having to survive the night with 2 liters. It's much more fun if you can have an unlimited supply and drink lots. That answer your question, Bhushan?
I think. Oh wait, I'll unmute him
Still
first.
there?
Thanks. Alok had post muted me. Yeah, that answers answers my question quite to the point. I'd appreciate if you could also elaborate and talk about a beginner kind of a journey that you have gone through maybe recently, which involves some decision making like that, and maybe some interesting aspects that a new pilot would definitely not anticipate, or something on those lines. Thanks.
I didn't quite understand your question, Bhushan. Could you repeat it again? I didn't quite get the gist of it. He's muted again, I think.
Just let me unmute. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Debu. So my question was maybe a recent Volbiv that you have done with new pilots that maybe you can talk about in brief, and some aspect that new pilots may not anticipate while going on a Volbiv, in spite of all this discussion and perhaps with the training that that you that you conduct for wall waves. Some surprises that that happen and very often happen with new wall wave pilots. So some brief description of experience in that light.
Okay, I got it now. Yeah, I think recently, I mean, I think a couple of years ago, I had a group of pilots who they were all pretty good but yeah, new to Volbiv, and it was a course. And until Volbiv, it's not always going for the longest distance or whatever. You might just be flying for a few hours and camping somewhere. And one of the issues I had a couple of times was deciding, the time of day that you're going to land. If you're going to land on one of the spurs between Bir and Dharamsala, obviously, if you're trying to land at 2 p.m., it's going to be quite pumping. The thermals are still on. It's a strong part of the day, and that was a hard point. Was trying to get pilots down during that time of the day. It's probably much better to be landing at a weaker. Once the thermal activity starts going down, say around 3 to 4 p.m., which is what I found. I mean, I managed to get down and land, and it was very lifty. And before I managed to get the whole group down, I was on the radio helping them in, and some of them flew around for about an hour, a bit more than an hour, even before they could actually get themselves down and land. So that's one thing to be aware of if you're a beginner and flying Volbiv, especially if you're going with a group of pilots who are maybe better and more skilled. Just remember what time of the day it is and how strong it is, and try not to push the landing. Obviously, if you've tried 3 or 4 passes and it's strong and you keep going up and you can't land, maybe you might need to wait for a while. You might need to stay in the air for another half an hour or whatever to wait for the conditions to actually get good for landing, so it's not too strong. Because obviously, if you're trying to force a landing in strong thermic conditions, and you find yourself at the wrong place at the wrong time, it could lead to a crash, which would be a shame. Whereas you just need to be a bit more patient, and you can get down safely. Same on the other side of that is, taking off in a new place in the morning. You might have a plan of, okay, today I need to fly here and it's that much, and maybe someone who is a good pilot might be able to take off with minimum wind and stay up in small morning weak thermals, whereas you need to make the decision is, if you wait maybe half an hour more, the wind might be much more consistent at takeoff and give you a much easier launch, and the conditions might be better. So yeah, not taking off too early as well, and making sure that conditions are working so that you can carry on with your flight. So, yeah.
That's really helpful. Thanks a lot, Debu.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else? Alok?
Yes,
Well,
next
okay,
question is
fine.
from Gurpreet.
Yeah.
He has typed this question, yeah, but go ahead, Gurpreet, yeah.
I know.
Please unmute himself.
Yes. So, hi Debu. How are you?
Hi, Gurpreet. I'm fine.
I see a lot of people asking about going to live in Deep, and sometimes I find it difficult to answer diplomatically. Is how much mountain experience they need before they go bivouac flying? I mean, I see some people who are totally like city, and they want to do bivouac, and I find it a little difficult. So this is the right moment to address that question. Because I know you grew up in
Sorry?
mountains. I say you have a lot of mountain experience. You grew up in mountains, and you ran a professional trekking company. You trekked a lot. So what level of mountain experience needed besides flying?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Gurpreet, and I totally agree with you. I have had the same, where people want to go BIV, and it's hard to diplomatically tell them, well, some people have actually never camped out for a night or gone on a trek. So I think your point is really valid, and to actually go in the mountains and do it safely, you need a trekking. You know what it's about, and how to survive. But yeah, like I said in the beginning, apart from the flying, you're absolutely right. You need, I would say, some minimum mountain experience to actually go Volbiv safely. And my advice, I mean, like I said, it's a lot of people's, a lot of paragliders dream about it. It's a very romantic idea to fly around and camp. Um, and I would say, if you are really into Volbiv, you're a paraglider pilot, and you really want to do it, but you have zero mountain experience, then maybe you should start with going for a few treks and actually learning how to spend time in the mountains, how to make a fire. And obviously, some fitness comes into it, and walking around walking in the mountains. So I would say, if you're really keen to do Volbiv, and you want to pursue a dream, then maybe start by doing, like, small 2, 3, 4 night treks. And once you've done a few of them, and are used to spending some time in the mountains and have got some experience with that, then you can move on to Volbiv. So yeah, I would say a minimum of mountain experience is absolutely necessary if you're going to think about flying and landing out in mountains. Where if anyone who has mountain experience, so like Gurpreet, you've done a lot of trekking over the years as well, and I know he ran, and a lot of us who are paragliders have mountain experience, because we love the mountains and we've been doing stuff for years. You know how quickly stuff can go wrong. The weather can be extreme. Things can change very quickly. So you need to be able to adapt to all of that. So yeah, I would say a minimum of mountain experience is absolutely necessary before you even think about Volbiv.
And what
Is
would that minimum be, Debu? Because there is a question on the chat saying that would trekking up to the takeoff be considered as a good idea?
uh, Walking up to the takeoff is always good for your fitness. No, what I'm talking about is actually, going out into the mountains for 2 or 3 day trek. Carry your stuff, or take a porter or a guide or whatever, and light a fire, cook your own food, sleep in the tent, go and fetch the water, and do all of those stuffs to survive in the mountain before you think about actually doing it on your paraglider. Would you agree with that, Gurpreet? Do you think that makes sense to say that to people?
Definitely, fully agree with you. I would personally put it even better than that. I would like to see them going solo camping, uh, being on their own, and doing all those things like fetching water, finding a route down. Maybe try to get down from a which doesn't have a normal marked route. That would be find your way to get mountain. Um, those kind of things I would add to it
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, first, absolutely. Like, some survival skills in the mountains before, just before you go and do it on a paraglider would be important. And then, as I said again, if it's your first few Volbivs, then I would really recommend doing it with someone who has done it before and has more experience and can help you out. Obviously, don't go on a big solo mission if you have no mountain experience.
Definitely agree with you. That's all. I have no further question.
Okay, I have next question from Daksh first. Rakesh, I'll let you ask. Give me a minute.
Should
The
we
question from
go? Should we carry on?
the que-
Yo,
the question from Daksh is, what is the highest altitude you've landed at, and how tricky does it become when you when you launch from snow at high altitudes?
uh, is this just general or landed for Bivy?
For Bivi, I think let's stick to the topic, but I think you can ask and answer both ways, general or BV style.
No,
Okay,
general.
general.
The highest I've landed at is 5,100 meters, and it was a mistake. It was in a moment of hypoxic happiness. And once I'd actually touched down, I was like, what the fuck did I just do? So I would not recommend that. And taking off again was actually, I was kind of lucky, and it just kind of happened, you know. A gust of wind came and glider inflated, and off I went. But yeah, I would think obviously landing anywhere. I've landed above 4,000 a few times, and I think that I've vivid at about 3.6, 3.7. Um, as soon as you're landing up higher, obviously, you know, flying in at higher altitudes, you're going to be landing a little bit faster. So the speed is a bit more. So you just need to keep that in mind. And taking off again, you know, it's going to be a little bit faster, and you need to bear in mind that, you know, you're it's much harder to do stuff at altitude. So I would say it's important to if you're going to take off at high, you know, if you land at a high altitude, you're going to take off. I would say it's important to make sure that you can, you know, try and get it done on the first attempt. So really make sure that you have a good place, your glider is laid out nicely, the wind conditions are good, because each attempt you miss, the whole process of getting everything set up again is really going to wear you out. So I've had that from experience of missing a few launches at about 4,500, and you're completely wiped out by the end of it, and that's when, you know, you can lose concentration and make a mistake. So I would recommend, if you're going to take off high, just to make sure the preparations are really well done so that you can get off on the first attempt. And yeah, landing up high again, be aware that, you know, if you cannot take off again, you are going to be somewhere stuck up high, and do you have the mountain skills to get yourself down safely from there, and all of those things. Basically, it's comes down to, you know, if you're landing high, it's risk versus reward. Is it actually worth doing this landing at this altitude? What are the rewards am I going to get, and etc etc. So yeah, working that out. Does that make sense, Daksh, to kind of what you wanted? Okay.
Rakesh, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Rakesh.
My question is, or rather, I would say, would you like to comment something about being prepared enough for the sleep in terms of the proper sleeping bag and tent, and because sometimes many times you get to hear from some European pilots that you know, you can just sleep in your glider, and how that can affect how the sleep can affect your next day of flying.
Yeah. Um, Great. That's a good question, Rakesh, and a good point. And yes, obviously, you know, obviously, if you're on a Volbev mission and you don't sleep half the night and have a shit night's sleep, the next day you're going to be tired. Your decision making is going to be off. You're not going to be on form, so you're not going to fly well. And obviously, you want to be on form, because, you know, a wrong decision could lead to an accident. So good point. Some people say you can just sleep in the glider. It depends on different people. Some people are, you know, can sleep easily. Some people need a bit more comfort. I will tell you personally what I use. I have a tent. I have a light tent. It weighs about 900 grams. Rakesh
Lanshan.
knows, you've got one similar. A Lanshan, that's the one. AliExpress, great. It's really good quality. You know, I bought it, paid $80 instead of like $400 for a fancy brand tent. So I have a little tent. Basically, I like a tent, and I bought myself a good mattress, which is a Thermarest blow-up mattress, which is quite thick, and I think insulation off the ground is just as important as having a good sleeping bag. Um, well, no, actually, I don't think having a good. Personally, I don't have a super good sleeping bag. I opted more for a light sleeping bag. It's fairly good, but it weighs, I think, 800 grams or 700 grams or something, and it's not super thick and not super warm. But what I personally do, if I feel the night is going to be cold, is I take my glider inside the tent with me. I fold it so I fold it in half like we used to fold gliders in the early days, and then half again. So it's folded all, all the lines are folded inside. And then I, inside the tent, I put my mattress, the sleeping bag, and then I put the glider beside folded in folds. And then when I go to sleep, I put a layer of the glider, like, double folds over the top of me. And that works super well. So I do use the glider to sleep. And I've had nights where we've slept at 3, 5, and the others have been freezing, and I had a great night's sleep. Um, Another thing with, yeah, like the sleeping for me, the sleeping bag is not so important because I use the glider inside the sleeping bag with the glider with a nice mattress inside a tent. And personally, I've never been cold, and I've always had a pretty good night's sleep. Does that make sense, Rakesh? All of those things?
Sure, great, thanks. One more thing I would say. Can you suggest people who are interested in Volbev, should they carry some spare lines? Because you've heard some stories sometimes that people snap some lines on not so friendly takeoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I personally have a repair kit, Volbiv, or any kind of flying. The repair kit, where it is? Here it is. Look, that's it. It's that big. And this has got everything in it. I have a whole bunch of. Kya kya maal hai? I have a whole bunch of unsheathed Kevlar lines and a needle to splice, so I can replace lines, or if I break a line, I can replace one pretty quickly. You saw Alok last year when we did the small biv. When we landed at 360, I'd broken 2 lines on the billing launch. So I have spare line in there that I can make a line. I have patch. I have needle and thread, pieces of Velcro, a Swiss Army knife. So yeah, that comes flying with me. It's in my harness all the time, wherever I go. So yes, I definitely take a repair kit PV, because if you land somewhere and break some lines and you can't fly out, you would be pretty pissed of not having a repair kit.
So from the preparation perspective, Debu,
Alok,
how would the repair kit, learning about the repair would also, how much serious should a person get about this, learning about repairing the kit? Because when we had that trip, you were trying to splice the lines, and it was something that not all of us know how to do it.
Yeah, basically, it's not so difficult. Splicing thin lines on a paraglider is pretty easy. And if you get someone who knows how to do it to show you once, and you have the right needle and the line, it's actually quite simple. So I think, it's quite an interesting thing to know. You should learn how to splice a line, and then have repair patch, which is pretty straightforward. If you have a hole in your glider, you need to be able to patch it up. So yeah, I think every pilot should learn how to repair basic repairs on a glider, and just stuff that can get you out of a situation where you need to fix your glider slightly to get down, or whatever, to get it. Maybe obviously if it's a big damage, you need professional to look at it and fix it. But yeah, when I do Volbiv courses as well, I usually do, we do talk about repairing and splicing and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's a great skill to have as a paraglider. If you break a line and you can replace it and keep flying, then great.
Debu, would you like to share any bear encounters or wildlife stories? Anything that you've encountered?
No, we've never really had any major wildlife sources. I think once behind in the Barot Valley when we were camping, there was lots of bear shit and lots of bear claws, which kind of made us a little bit scared. But we never saw a bear. I mean, I've seen bears in the wild, but at a distance. I've never had a close encounter with, luckily, with a bear or any wild animals. I've seen, bears in the distance, and obviously flying, I've seen quite a few wild animals, but nothing. No, I don't have a spectacular story on that, unfortunately, Rakesh.
Okay, cool.
Sorry.
There was a follow-up question on this from Rohit. Do you carry something to protect yourself from wild animals, like fireworks? Did you get the question? Yeah.
I didn't get the question.
Yeah.
Let
Do
me
you, do
look.
you do you carry something to protect yourself from wild animals like fireworks? There was a question from Rohit.
I thought about that quite a few years ago, and I mean, apart from my repair kit, often have emergency kit with other various things in it, and I did put 3 or 4 bombs in there quite a few years ago, just for that thing, in case a bear comes, why not? So I put them in, and last year I think they'd been in the bag for about 5 years. At our Vol Biv, we got stuck at one place for 2 nights, 3 nights even, and I thought, well, and it was Diwali, so we thought, let's let them off. They didn't work anymore, obviously, so it was useless. But yeah, why not? I would put a couple of bombs in there. It could always be handy, and worst case, it can be entertainment.
Nice one. Yeah. Okay. Nikhil, go ahead. You can ask your question. Next in queue is Nikhil.
Hi, Debu. Hello, am I audible?
Hi, Nikhil.
Yes.
Yeah,
Nikhil,
I was just looking at the question.
I have 2 questions. One being, what's the checklist going in your mind when you're looking for a landing in the high mountains? Because there's no luxury of flat land, so you're choosing between probably a bad landing and a worse landing. So what kind of assessments or checklists you're running in your mind when you're actually planning on your landing approach in the high mountains?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. It doesn't necessarily have to be worst or even worst. It can be a nice spot, There's lots of nice spots in the mountains. Obviously, the first thing is, you're going to be looking at safety, obstacles, wind flow, and is it feasible, and is it good landing at a nice safe place, and then if you have to walk for 4 hours, it's beside the point. You might as well fly down. So obviously, one of the main things of landing in mountains is, for me, one of the most important things is that the re-takeoff ability of a place. And okay, once I've figured out, okay, I can land there and I could take off there, or I can take off in the same spot or nearby, and it looks good, then you're obviously looking for, is it in the lee? Is there any rotor? Is it safe? Is there a good wind flow coming up? Obviously, what are the dangers? Is it going to be safe, basically? And the more experience you have as a pilot or of flying in mountains, the more you'll be able to figure out that, yes, okay, I guess that's a good spot, or that doesn't look safe, let me look for somewhere else. And obviously, trying it out or flying around the area a few times, if it's in a lifty area and you have the privilege of being able to check it out for a while before actually making the decision, or making 1 or 2 passes to check out what the air mass is doing in that particular place. And if you make one pass and it doesn't feel good, then obviously, maybe it's not a good spot. So all of those things, yeah. You're on mute, I think, for some
Yes.
reason.
And the second question was, can you throw some light on the group dynamic when you fly as a BV group? So what kind of protocols do you
Yeah.
follow with the group? Say if one person lands, does it mean that everyone else lands? Or if you lose the contact, or if different people land at different places, what kind of protocols do you follow?
That's a very good question, and different people who fly BV have different views on that. Basically, for me, it's a very tough one. I think the first important thing is, I mean, obviously, when I'm running, I've started running BV courses. That's different. You have a group of students, and you're in charge, and you're taking care of them. If I go BV with friends or as a group of pilots doing it, for fun, I think the first most important thing is that everyone should have a similar level, you know, because if you have like two very good pilots and three not so good, I mean, it's possible, but then, if you are the pilot, I've often found if, if I'm going bivvy with friends and there's friends who have lower level, I end up feeling responsible, which is if I'm friends to do it and to have the rules clear between everyone first. So let's say, the first person lands, everyone lands there, or one person goes down, everyone lands nearby and waits for the other person to walk up. Or, you can do it differently. It's really up to the group and what you're trying to do as an objective. And another thing that I strongly believe is that the group should never be too big. For me, the ideal group is 4 people, 4 or 5 max. So at least you can stick 2 and 2. I think as soon as a BV group starts getting of more than 5 or 6 people, there's always someone who's going to land out or something's going to happen, and that, for me, that makes a mess usually. So I think the level of the group, the number of people in the group, and to preset your priorities or how you're going to do this, I think that's important. Does that answer your question, Nikhil?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great, you're welcome.
A follow-up question on this: what about a buddy system in a bigger group? Maybe two can go together and in a bigger group. Will that be a good idea?
Yeah, that can work, but then eventually, doing that, the group is going to get split up at some point or the other. Obviously, that often happens. Uh, but yeah, you can have two and two stick together, but then it's always difficult. If you find yourself, your buddy got stuck behind, and you're with the other guy's buddy, and these two got stuck, and how. So it needs to be in basically, I think, to actually, depends on your level, but having a smaller group uh, cuts the problems down a lot. Having a bigger group always ends up being more complicated, because yeah, you end up, it slows the whole group down usually. But then depends, if you just, if you're a bunch of friends and you're going out for one night bv in beer, and you're 5 or 6 or 7, doesn't matter, you have your goal, we're all going to go and land there in bv, then you obviously go and do it. Who doesn't make it doesn't make it. But if you're doing like, more of a multi-day bv, then yeah, it's important to have those things figured out early, because they can create tension later.
Yeah,
So you didn't wait for me, or you were supposed to. So yeah, so
yeah,
a smaller group is would be the idea.
yeah. I think it's really important to have a conflict resolution mechanism within the group, and because
Yeah,
there are different humans, and they will definitely have conflicts. And if there are conflicts, what should be a better way to resolve it? That should be there. Yeah, in any
yeah,
relationship for that matter.
yeah. If it's all clear before, then it definitely helps. Yeah.
Good. So next question is from Bhushan. Go ahead, Bhushan.
Hey, hi Debu again. So my question
Hi.
was about you decide to go on a longish bivy, say about 4 or 5 days, and you are maybe 2 days into a
Yeah.
bivy, and you land, and you see that the weather tomorrow doesn't look good. Maybe you wake up the next day, the weather still doesn't look good. You are at somewhere like 3,005 or 4,000 something altitude. So what is your strategy in this situation, and what do you recommend for most pilots to walk down? But even if we walk down, we are not sure, maybe we are in the back mountains, so walking out could be also not the best option, especially with bad weather. And waiting for good weather could mean another day or even perhaps more. We are not really sure in the mountains. So something on that.
Okay, that's a good question, and I can give you a live example of that's exactly what happened last year. Last year, we decided, a bunch of friends, that we're going to do a big Volbiv. We're going to leave from Bir and we're going to go towards the Nepal border as far as we can, the classic big route. And we were all prepared, and it was all very exciting. And the first day, well, we took off and it was kind of slow. I broke lines. We had to land and repair. Alok and Viz and Sunit were with us, and they were just coming for the first night with us. And we all landed at Prussia. We had a great night. There was a lot of us, and I think the main team, there was, I think, 6 of us carried on the next day. I think it was 6 of us, yeah. And our plan was to fly east as far as possible. We had a week, 10 days time. Uh, we had big plans, but the next day we flew from Prussia and we didn't get very far. Again, one of the pilots had broken lines, so we had to we found a place to land. It was quite intimidating crossing the gorge, the Mandi Gorge area, and I'd never been there, so I was happy to be there. And we landed to fix the lines, and conditions got quite strong, and half the group decided they wanted to carry on. Half said they didn't want to take off; it was too strong. Again, we got into that situation. So we said, okay, who wants to fly? We decided we'll camp slightly lower down. There was a place. Um, so some of us flew down to the place we wanted to camp, and we picked a takeoff for the next morning, which was a bit of a walk up a hill. They looked like a good spot. Antoine, who was with us, had been there before, and Mike, who had done the Himalayan Odyssey in 2010. So they knew of a place to take off. We camped, and the next one of the people had a bad night's sleep. He wasn't ready to fly the next day. He was super tired. So we walked up to this temple, beautiful place to lodge, and we said, okay, let's stay here today. We'll have a rest day, and we'll fly the next day. The next day was super stable, so no clouds, no thermals. So we stayed there another night. The next day was super stable again, so we stayed another night. So we decided we could have. There was even a road there. We could have driven out, but we waited 2 days, and then we decided that yeah, obviously what the situation is, and we had big plans and ended up not doing much, but we had a great time and we had whiskey, so it was fine. We camped for 3 nights in the same place, and it was a beautiful spot, and we just enjoyed being together and having a great time, even if we didn't get all the flying goals we did. So in the end, yeah, it just depends on how important your adventure is for you, and you need to make the calls that it's not going to happen and get yourself safely out of there.
All right.
That
If it was any
kind of
tougher,
answer?
sure, it does. It does. So if it was any of a tougher situation, maybe you would have taken call in the interest of safety. Perhaps you're running out of food, or maybe not enough water to be at the same spot
Yeah,
for.
if it was a question of safety, I mean, depending on what the weather, bad weather could mean storms and unflyable. I mean, for us, it was, we could have flown down, but if it's unflyable, then obviously, you need to make the decision regarding the supplies you have and the situation you're in, to either walk out of there if it's possible, or to hang in there and wait for better flying weather, or to move yourself to maybe where there is a about before really comes into it. Once you've done the flying and you're on the ground, that's when you need the mountain experience Gurpreet was talking about. Is you need to be able to make those decisions rationally, looking at safety, and people who have experience in mountains. That's when it's going to really help to have the mountain experience to make the decision of, do I stay here? Do I move? Do I, can I walk out of here? Obviously, again, when you've landed in a place like that, taking into account that you cannot fly again and having a route that you can walk down to safety and civilization is also a big part of the decision making during a Volbeat. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks a lot. That helps. Quite
Cool.
serious.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Debu, do
yeah,
you
it
have
can be.
anything more to share, or we can continue with questions only?
I'm happy to continue with questions. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, I mean, with the kid stuff, I can send people who are interested, get age, whatever. And then
Yeah, we can share in the WhatsApp group itself. Okay, next question is from KK. KK, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Debu again. Debu, one very basic question. How do you go about rationing your food and water in the mountains? Not that, I mean, I was talking to a few friends, it's not that easy to find water even at the golf course. So, if you're out on a 3-day bivvy, how do you go about with your food?
Yeah.
Just imagine you starting from Gir. So what is the kind of food and water that you'd carry
Yeah.
with you?
I would say, if I'm going on a Volbiv and I'm not sure to be able to land somewhere with water, I would take at least 1 hour. Basically, you need to be able to find water. I mean, you can do maybe 2 days if you take 5 liters. But more than that, you need to be able to find waters. And again, that's when mountain experience comes into the story. If you're in mountains, there is water most places. You might have to walk to it. But yeah, I don't think you can take more than 2, maybe. If you start carrying 10 liters of water, then you need a bigger glider, basically. So yeah, I take 3 liters, and I really try. And if I'm landing somewhere new, I would rather land somewhere that I might have to walk a little bit more, or before I land, I've actually checked out the area.
Okay, Debu, I think we have lost you.
Yeah.
Dehydrated meals.
Debu, you're gonna have to do that again. There is no connection from your end.
Last year, Kaushal started making some really good. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Still hanging.
Yeah.
Okay, start again, Debu.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you
My
now.
internet
Go ahead, Debu,
connection isn't. Okay. Did we get any of that, or was all of that?
The dehydrated food
not
we were
well?
talking about. We were on that topic when you lost you.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of options of dehydrated food. Kaushal last year launched some products which are very good, and you just need to do minimal cooking or add hot water. Obviously, you can get stuff that just needs hot water added and is very light. I tend to take those, and otherwise, you basically look at food that is nutritious enough and that is light and needs minimal cooking. So Maggi noodles, porridge, nuts, chocolate, all that kind of trekking, lighter trekking food that you can take. Obviously the lighter and the more, the better it is. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, are there any further questions, guys? You can come forward again. Otherwise, Debu, let me ask you some questions here. How should if anyone were to start, which terrain should they prefer to start? What would you think would be an easier terrain to start with, or something that they can control within India, abroad, anywhere? Yeah.
I think beer is the ideal place, really. There's quite a few spots that are known for fairly easy takeoff and landing. Uh, and I mean, even like even 360, it's you can even go and stay at the camp and stuff. It's not real Volbiv, but for your first time out to land somewhere and spend the night, it's not bad, and then there's obviously the golf course, Hobbiton. There's plenty of places that I would say beer is a good place to start. Also, a lot of people know beer and have flown there, so they know the area and the aerology and stuff. So yeah, I would say, especially for Indian pilots, I don't think there's anywhere better. I mean, the only person I know who actually did try and do some BV flying around Panchgani area was Dilip, and he actually went and spent a night or two out, but he came back with some horror stories of of snakes and wild boars, and
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
came back quite shaken from some of those, and he decided that it was maybe not the best place for Volbeat, but it still can be possible. I mean, you can still do it. There's anywhere really, but yeah, I think beer is probably the most friendly terrain that you're going to find in India, and for okay.
Okay, and but how would you rate flying in the Alps and doing something similar in the Alps? Because from the safety perspective or rescue perspective, there is more relatively more margin. No, there are more people to help you around. If anything, you press an SOS button and someone is there in 15 minutes.
Yeah, in the Alps, obviously the rescue is much more available and much more efficient. Uh, the the thing is here with the flying weather and the flying is actually quite a bit more technical, I find, than flying in beer. And you need a good local knowledge of places, because the wind here is a much bigger factor than we have in beer. There's as soon as there's any general wind, it's going to change the whole flying characteristics of a place. And there is a lot of big valleys, so a lot of valley breeze, and obviously a lot of the places as well are national parks and forest land, and a lot of the places camping is actually forbidden. I mean, if you land high and you camp, no one sees you, fine. But if you do land in a place, you could get into trouble. You're not allowed to make a fire in most places. It's all much more regulated and controlled here. So it's obviously, I would say, for someone who's a good BV pilot, knows what they're doing, it's fine. But even in a situation law-wise where you could get into trouble, as they're much more strict here with rules and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, Debu, we can go ahead with your list. There are no questions at the moment. If there is something else that comes up, I will let you know. Maybe we can go ahead with the list.
Yeah, I can. I quickly go through the list, and then we can, if there's any more questions, and then we can stop at that. Yeah, and then I'll just quickly go through it. So I'll just go through. Okay.
But बर्तन मांजने के
Oh,
लिए बुला
yeah.
रहे हैं.
Duty पे आजा. So the first thing on my list is the sleeping bag and the sleeping mat. I talked about them already, so I'm not going to go into that. I said, yeah, a fairly light sleeping bag can always be compensated with the glider. Important to have a good mattress. I mean, a blow-up one takes minimum space in your harness, and is obviously more comfortable and gives you better insulation. Um, um, I'll talk quickly about packing stuff into your harness as well, because obviously getting all of this stuff, you must be wondering, how do I get all of this stuff into my harness? one thing I do is I take out the protection from the harness, the foam protection, and I replace that with the sleeping bag and the inflatable mattress. Which the inflatable mattress I even actually slightly inflate it so that it comes to the same volume and same sort of size and as the protector. Actually, it's even almost better than the protection I have in my harness. Once the sleeping bag and the air mattress have been replaced and slightly blown up, that makes that can make your protection, and you're not wasting any space in your harness. You're using that space. X died. If you're brave, I like to have a little tent, like I said, and I have one I bought on AliExpress for pretty cheap, and it's pretty good quality. And I've had it a couple of years, and it's working well. The next item is a cooking pot, or that becomes your plate, your bowl, or whatever. This is quite an important item. You are going to obviously need to heat water, whatever, for drinking, for tea, for putting in your dehydrated meals. There's a big debate, ongoing debate about the actual pot. Where do you put the pot? Because it's obviously a hard piece of equipment. Now again, that's always slightly delicate where to find a place that is safe. Obviously, you don't want to put it near your back if you're going to have a hard landing or crash. So I usually put it in my cockpit or somewhere in the front where it's not going to get in the way. But that's one essential piece of kit that you need. Um, there's always a question of a stove. Since the last couple of years, I've started carrying a little gas, those little gas camping canisters and stove, because if you're, if you're going to land where there's wood, you can obviously make a fire and heat your water and cook your stuff. But if you're landing where the wood is not available, or it's difficult, or maybe it's wet, having a little stove really helps, and it's also much quicker. You can land, and in 10 minutes you can have hot water for a meal or a cup of tea. So a stove is not essential. Depends really where you are flying, and what the availability of wood is, and all of those things. Next on my list, I have a head torch, pretty essential. Doesn't have to be a head torch, but if you're obviously outside at night, very good to have some kind of so yeah, usually I have a nice light head, which is then we have obviously a knife. Uh, it's good to have a multi tool, with some pliers, a knife, a saw. I have a Swiss knife which has all of those things in it. Um, Stuff for lighting fire. I usually carry at least 2 or 3 lighters and a box of matches, or have a few spares, so that because it's obviously nice if you have wood to, and especially if it's cold, to be able to make a fire in the evening. Next, I have something to carry water in. Obviously, a camelback is good when you're flying, but I also have I actually use the same as a camelback pouch. I have 3 pouches that are 2 liters each, and I carry the extra water in them. And if you have a water source, you can use those pouches to gather water. You can have a bigger one. I have a 10-liter one that I use occasionally on longer flights. That's great for collecting water, so that you can have water in your camp. Next on my list, I usually take some rope and a saw. The saw is handy for cutting wood. Rope, I have a thinnish rope, but that can hold the weight of a person. And I have about 20 meters. It does take up a bit of weight and space, but could be very handy in tree rescue, or getting down from a place where you might need well, if you were there yesterday, you would know what needs to be in there. But yeah, if you take any specific medication, have that with you, and then the usual emergency things that you would need as in your usual paragliding medical kit. If you can get some strong painkillers, that's always good, just in case. Um, Next, I have a power bank. I take a 10,000 mAh power bank, something like this, not very big. Uh, and I have a little solar panel as well, which I've been using, which charges up the power bank, which obviously then charges your phone. I can charge my Vario with USB. Like I said, I have a head torch that charges with USB. Yeah, if you can try and have all your electronics so that you can charge them from the same device, that really helps. And if you have a solar panel that can charge your battery, you can obviously go for a few days with having all the devices that you need to charge. Um, we talked in InReach or Spot, highly recommended, but obviously illegal in India, so that's yeah, a little complicated. I take hiking poles with me because they really help if you have to walk out. Foldable trekking poles, which are quite small, and the tent I have actually needs those hiking poles to set it up. So yeah, I would, but that's personal choice. And then clothing. I mean, usually we wear, if we're flying anywhere in the mountains, we wear quite a lot of warm stuff on our upper body. So usually, yeah, I have all the flying stuff plus minimum extra change of t-shirts or underwear, whatever. But yeah, really minimum. I mean, I don't mind not changing for 3 or 4 days on a vol biv. And obviously the warm stuff you have is gonna, you can use it at night, and it's gonna keep you warm. Food we talked about, and yeah, another thing is just I want to quickly go before I finish. Is fitness is to have at least a minimum of fitness. You should be ready to be able to walk out for 3 or 4 hours if you get stuck somewhere. You should have that minimum fitness to be able to walk out carrying your stuff, and obviously some training, and with the flying training and the skills that we talked about before. Okay, that's it kind of from my list. Alok, any questions
Yes.
before we finish?
I think there was one question from Ravi Sharma. Ravi, you can ask your question here now.
Yeah, hi Debu. Hi Alok. Good
Hi,
evening.
Ravi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ravi.
Yeah, okay. So Debu, I mean, we heard about the list and the inventory which you carry, while doing this kind of flying. But yeah, my question is related to communication, So more or less like, we are taking radios and mobile phones. So what if you are in a remote place where, your phone is not reachable and your walkie-talkie limits to internal communication within the pilots, within the group. So in case of emergency, how do you communicate to the base? Or somewhere like, you can get some assistance in case of some kind of injury or some kind of fatal emergency or something. How do you
Well,
communicate?
we obviously talked about the Spot and the InReach devices, which have a SOS function, and you can program who that's going to go to. So that would obviously, if you have those devices, that's obviously the best one. And if not, then if you have one member of your team that's injured or whatever, then and you don't have any other way of communicating, then you either need to get yourself to a place where you can get through to rescue services, so either flying out of there or walking to a place where you get signal. But I mean, most people who are doing these kind of which works from most places, so you can actually get information out and give your location to rescue using those devices. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Deb.
Next
Okay.
question is from Rakesh. Rakesh, go ahead. Yeah.
Debu, what solar charger would you recommend?
I, I, there's so many these days, Rakesh. I don't know. I don't even know which one I have actually. I left mine in India. But yeah, I mean, you probably know better than me what to recommend, Rakesh.
Oh yeah,
There's so many
charger
brands and lighter ones. Huh?
I've still not figured out this solar charger thing. I'm trying to figure.
Okay.
Anyways,
I think the best one I've seen was the one Monkey Jim had last year. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was a roll-up one, and it was super efficient. I forget the brand. If I remember, I'll send you a message, Rakesh. But that one was really good. He would put it out, and it would immediately charge stuff really well. But it was super expensive, I think, from what I remember.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay.
Great.
So I think there are no further questions, guys. If you have any further questions, just let us know. Give us a hint. Or Vijay, do you have a question? I guess no. Cool. Debu, thank you very much for this session. This was really
I'm
informative.
losing you. Okay. You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Several requests have been coming that you share the list with everyone. So I think on the WhatsApp group that would
Yeah.
help us. Yeah. The lists
Yeah,
that we
I'll
talked
put
about.
it up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
let me, guys, you can please unmute yourself and thank Debu for this session. Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks a
Debu.
lot, Debu.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. It was fun.
Thanks,
Hi,
Debu.
thank you.
This is
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Devu. Thank you,
Thanks
Alok.
for being patient, Debu.
Hi, thank you. Thank you,
Hi,
Debu.
thanks,
Okay,
Debu.
thank you, Debu. Debu, thank you.
You're welcome, everyone. It was a pleasure. Have a nice evening.
Thank you for being patient, Debu, taking so many questions. Thank you very much.
No
Yeah.
worries.
Good.
Bye
So
today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll
Devu.
stop the recording, guys.